Dear students, welcome to our digital classroom again. I'm with you with new lesson under the new unit. Uh, Different lessons are chosen to be presented in front of you in a very disorganized way. Important lessons are chosen first. So in a very haphazard way, lessons have been chosen to be presented in front of you. In conformity with these, Unit 2, Lesson 3 has been chosen to be delivered in today's class. What is the title of Unit 2? Greatest Scientific Achievements, and Lesson 3, the scientific breakthrough we are waiting for. These are the lessons which will be discussed today in this class. So before discussing the main class, let's get acquainted with the learning outcomes. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to comprehend the advancement of science. Science is advancing day by day, and we can easily comprehend the advancement of science within this lesson. And at the same time, you will be able to analyze the causes of climate change and learn the importance of clean energy and DNA computing. Different aspects have been presented in this lesson in a very organized way. So if you go through this lesson, you will get the idea of different aspects from different point of view in a very organized way. So let's get the acquaintance of this class. Have a look of this image. You can easily have the idea beforehand by watching or observing this image. These are the equipments used to produce clean energy, and this has a close connection with our globe. So as usual, before delve into the passage, we try to make you clear about some important vocabularies. And here, breakthrough, you will frequently face the word breakthrough while going through the passage. For that reason, the word breakthrough has been presented as a vocabulary for your convenience. Pass through, a barrier. Breakthrough, that means we can also mention it as a great achievement as well. And prototype. Prototype means a preliminary model of something. Model of something. Whenever something is constructed finally, we produce a preliminary model of the thing that will be constructed. So the preliminary model is called prototype. And milestone. The word milestone has twofold meanings. One is a stone set up beside a road to mark the distance. In order to mark the distance, this sort of stones are set in the road. This is called milestone or landmark. And another meaning of milestone is successive development, which has significant meaning. That means an action or event marking a significant change or stage in the development. That means successive development with dramatic change. We can convey this meaning by using the word landmark. Next, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. We know the abbreviated form of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acids. The passage deals with DNA. What is DNA? There is no definition that connects you to the biological concept. Here you find a different definition of DNA. What's DNA? DNA is substance. We know what is DNA. DNA is substance. Okay, DNA is substance. Here you find information, genetic information. Okay, living organism. If you play these three vocabs, you can easily form the definition of DNA. What is DNA? Now, DNA is a substance of living organism that stores genetic information. Just make a link of these three information. DNA, what is DNA? DNA is a substance of living organism that carries or stores genetic information. So the passage defines the definition of DNA in this way. DNA is a substance that stores genetic information of living organism. Each and every living organism possesses DNA. And what is the ultimate function of DNA? DNA stores the genetic information. DNA has the capability of storing genetic information. And that prospect has been utilized by the scientists to invent something new. So what is the new invention which is invented out of the concept of DNA? We will come across it in the next slide. So what is DNA? DNA is a substance of living organism that stores or carries the genetic information. So it has vast capability of storing genetic information. As DNA has the capability of storing genetic information, the concept has been used to invent DNA computer. We will come across the fact of DNA computer later. Let's get acquainted with another concept which has been mentioned in your text. Okay, ancestral behavior. Just have a look on this vocabulary: ancestral behavior and DNA, a carrier of ancestral behavior. Now the information gives you another idea that DNA is the carrier of ancestral behavior, as it stores genetic information. At the same time, it is mentioned in the passage that it is the carrier of genetic or ancestral behavior. So the passage says that the DNA is treated as a carrier of ancestral behavior. As it carries the ancestral behavior, so it can be mentioned that DNA is a carrier of ancestral behavior because it carries ancestral behavior since the inception of our birth. Next, what we find, DNA computer. The concept of DNA has been taken out of the capability of DNA. What is the capability of DNA? Just recap the definition which we found from the concept of DNA. What is DNA? Is the living is the carrier of ancestral behavior, and it has the capability of storing genetic information. So this potentiality has been used to invent DNA computer. So the idea of DNA computer comes from the concept of DNA. From the concepts of DNA. What's the concept of DNA? Yes, DNA can store the ancestral behavior and it can store the genetic information. So out of this concept, DNA computer is supposed to be invented. Why? To store information. To store information and to perform complex calculations. So in order to perform the complex calculations and store information, scientists tend to invent DNA computer using the concept of DNA. So the DNA computer, which is supposed to be invented on the basis of the concept of DNA, is supposed to be invented to perform complex calculations and to store information. So these two are the prime factors for which scientists tend to invent DNA computer on the basis of the concept of DNA. So this is the concept of DNA and Maya 2, the prototype of DNA computing. So DNA computer is supposed to be invented, so Maya 2 is the prototype. That means preliminary model of DNA computer. The information is mentioned in your text. No need to memorize anything, just develop your understanding. Then, concept of DNA. Here you will find the summary of the concept of DNA related to DNA computer. So let's get the fact first. The concept of DNA computer is taken from the efficiency of DNA, as DNA is very much efficient in storing genetic information. So the concept has been taken in order to invent DNA computer. So DNA is very much efficient in storing information, and DNA is available in living organism, as it has been mentioned in one of the slides. So DNA computer, regarding DNA computer, the concept has been taken considering the efficiency of DNA of the living organism. Then DNA computer is currently in its infancy. It has not been flourished in a very satisfactory way. It is under a process. So for that reason, it is said DNA computer is currently in its infancy. And at the same time, it is mentioned that if it is perfected as it is in its infancy, if the perfection is given, it will bring about revolution. It will bring about revolution for what? In storing information in a limited space, in a very speck of space. Huge information can easily be stored. So it is said that as it is in infancy, if it is perfected, we will be able to store huge information in a limited space, and that will bring about revolution. So revolutionary change will be brought with the perfection of DNA computer. So next, what happens with DNA? It is capable of holding thousands of years of high definition video. Thousands of years of high definition video can easily be held with its capability. And it is capable of storing information in a limited space. It has been mentioned earlier that in a very limited space, it is capable of storing information. And this sort of capability has been derived from the efficiency of DNA of the living organism as well. Okay, capable of showing extreme efficiency in storing information. Okay, this efficiency has been mentioned frequently again and again to have the clear idea of the capability of DNA of the living organism, and capable of holding all the printed materials in the world. All the printed materials can be stored in DNA computer, and at the same time capable of holding genetic information. So what is the function? If we summarize the function of DNA computer, what happens with DNA can also happen with DNA computer. What efficiency is found in DNA can also be found in DNA computer. That means DNA is capable of holding information. At the same time, DNA computer is capable of holding information that can be imagined. That is beyond imagination, the capability of DNA computer. And it can also hold printed materials of the world in a very limited space, and it can store information as DNA gives us the conception of holding the ancestral behavior within its a framework. So it is capable of storing information in a limited space, capable of holding the high definition video, and capable of holding all the imprinted materials of the world. These are the capacities of the DNA computer, which is derived from the concept of DNA of the living organism. Then you will get acquainted with the idea of permanent moon base. So this lesson has been designed with proper division with different ideas. DNA computer, the concept of DNA and information of DNA has been given. Then comes to permanent moon base. What happens in permanent moon base? Moon base project refers to plan of setting up human habitation in the moon. Moon base project refers to the accomplishment of the establishment of human habitation in the moon. So if human habitation is established in the moon, what will happen will be discussed in the next slide. So what is moon base project? Moon base project refers to a plan of setting up human habitation. It is a plan of setting up human habitation. So different space agencies come up with their idea of constructing moon base by 2030. This is the deadline of the construction of moon base by different agencies. So as there is the possibility of establishing human habitation in moon, so there comes a deadline by 2030. Different agencies decide to establish moon base by this deadline. And what happens? But the biggest barrier to this project, what will be the barrier to this project? Definitely money. Fabulous amount of money is required to the execution of this plan. So money is the biggest barrier, and you will find a criticism of Buzz Aldrin, and Buzz Aldrin criticizes this execution. So what is the criticism? We will come across the criticism later. And this is the actual image of Buzz Aldrin, and Buzz Aldrin criticized this venture. Why did he criticize? We will come across it later. So up to this, we have come across the fact that by 2030, different agencies decide to establish moon base, and money is the ultimate barrier, and huge amount of money will be required for the establishment of moon base. For that reason, Buzz Aldrin criticizes this venture. So what is his suggestion? He suggests to NASA that it is more important to save the existing adorable planet, that means our Earth, existing adorable planet. So it is supposed to save our existing adorable planet, because each and every moment the essence and life spirit of a planet is getting extracted out of our unwise activities. For that reason, it is very much important to save our adorable planet. If there is no planet, there will be no existence of human beings as well as the wildlife and wilderness. So planet should be saved first, and we will have to have a good focus on it. So it is more important. For that reason, Buzz Aldrin mentions that it is more important to save the existing adorable living than to construct moon base. The construction of moon base shouldn't be prioritized. Rather, the attempts of saving our adorable planet should be prioritized. For that reason, at the same time, Buzz Aldrin mentions that NASA should put more emphasis on different issues like clean energy. What is clean energy? What is the function of clean energy? We will come across it later. Then constructing moon base. Instead of constructing moon base, we will have to have a pragmatic focus on clean energy, because without the assurance of clean energy, our adorable planets can never be saved. So what is the ultimate problem? What happens to our adorable planet? And what will be the ultimate solution of clean energy has been discussed later. So NASA's plan different space agencies come up with different plans to establish moon base by their datelines mentioned, and what happens within the framework of their dateline has also been mentioned in very organized way. So NASA's plan to have one constructed by 2024. By 2024, they have decided to construct a moon base, NASA, and ESA's plan to construct a moon base by 2025, and by 2025 they decided to construct a moon base. At the same time, Japan's space agency planned to construct a moon base by 2030, and India's plan to construct a moon base by 2030 as well. With Aldrin's criticism, we also come across Aldrin's criticism. At the same time, we have also come across the Aldrin's suggestion on having focus on clean energy instead of constructing moon base. So what is clean energy? We have come across the term clean energy, and Aldrin emphasizes clean energy rather than on the establishment of moon base. So what is clean energy? Clean energy should be prioritized and should be brought under focus to save our planet. So what is the ultimate message given by Aldrin? So before getting acquainted with the message, let's get acquainted with the fossil fuel. What is fossil fuel? Coal, oil, natural gas, these are associated with terms fossil fuels. And what happens with fossil fuels? So coal and oil are denoted as a fossil fuel, and fossil fuel is a non-renewable source of energy. What is fossil fuel? It can never be renewed. For that reason, it is said non-renewable source of energy, fossil fuel, and out of fossil fuel we get energy, and this fossil fuel can never be renewed if it is exhausted. And this fossil fuel, out of fossil fuel we get energy, and out of combustion we derive energy. The combustion is needed, and out of this combustion we get energy, that means electricity. And in one hand we get energy, in the other hand we get the elements that are very much harmful for environment. So greenhouse gases released in the air through the combustion of fossil fuel, and with the release of greenhouse gases, air pollution happens. So environment is frequently polluted with the release of greenhouse gas. And how do we derive greenhouse gases? Greenhouse gases are derived through the combustion of fossil fuel, and this fossil fuel is required to get energy, electricity. So in one hand we get energy, at the same time we get the fatal animals which are very much harmful for environment. So greenhouse gas energy is released, at the same time we get energy. And the passage mentions that 85% of all energy comes by burning fossil fuel. So through the combustion of fossil fuel, about 85% energy is derived. At the same time, the greenhouse gas is released into the air. For that reason, the environment pollution has become very much rampant. So you can now have the idea why Aldrin discourages the use of fossil fuel and encourages the application of clean energy. So out of fossil fuel, though we get energy, it is very much harmful for environment. For that reason, Aldrin suggests that we should have focused on clean energy. So fossil fuel, how we get fossil fuel? How we get a fossil fuel? The fossil fuel are products produced from fossilized plants and animals. So we have come across the fact that fossil fuel is important for having power, electricity, and it has also been mentioned that 85% of electricity is derived out of fossil fuel, and what happens so with the procedure of getting power or electricity. Greenhouse gas emission is seen. Out of this emission, environment is getting polluted. So fossil fuel can never be the ultimate solution of saving our adorable planet mentioned in one of the slides. So how do we derive fossil fuel? So fossil fuels are produced from fossilized plants and animals. Whenever plants and animals get fossilized under the earth, then fossil fuel is formed, and we derive that fossil fuels out of the formation from the fossilized plants and animals. And the process of fossilization, the process through which fossilized plants and animals are converted into fossil fuels, is called fossilization, and that fossilization takes place under the ground. So this fossilization takes place under the ground. So fossilized plants and animals are used to get fossil fuels, and the process of getting fossil fuel, that means fossilization, happens under earth. So fossilization happens under earth. We have come across the fact, and out of this process we get fossil fuel, and out of fossil fuel we get energy, and at the same time we get detrimental elements that are used against nature. So fossil fuels should not be used, and we should not have focus on fossil fuels. At the same time, it has been mentioned that it is not renewable. It is non-renewable. What happens if all fossil fuels get exhausted? There will be no energy. So we should have focus on clean energy. This is the suggestion of Aldrin. So fossil fuels, we will get the information about fossil fuels. The fossil fuels are not expected to last long. This is the fact for which Aldrin discourages to have focus on fossil fuels. And at the same time, it is not renewable, and it is not expected to last long, and it will be exhausted in near future. What if it is exhausted in near future? There will be no energy, there will be no electricity, and we will have to go back to our primitive life without having power and electricity. At the same time, they pollute the environment. So what are the negative effects of the use of fossil fuel? They are not renewable, and it is expected that they will not last long, and they will soon be exhausted. At the same time, it is very much harmful for environment. It is liable for environment pollution. So we should not have focus on fossil fuels. Rather, we should have focus on clean energy. So at the same time, they have led to tension between nations. The conflict and stripes are very much common between the two developed countries, so over the issue of having fossil fuel. So the fossil fuel creates strife. At the same time, fossil fuel creates tension. What will happen if they all get exhausted? So this is a reason that gives birth to tension between two nations. At the same time, it also creates the elements that give birth to strifes between the two nations as well. So clean energy we are discussing, and what are the source of clean energy? Solar, wind and windmill. Windmill is driven with the force of wind. So wind and windmill all are natural elements derived from nature. And hydropower, biofuel. What is biofuel? A fuel derived immediately from residue. So biofuel, hydropower, solar, wind and windmill are the sources from which we can get clean energy. That means these are the wonderful source of clean energy, and these sources are derived from nature. And geothermal as well, produced by the internal heat of the earth. But the internal heat of the earth is used as a mechanism of producing power. So in that case, geothermal is also the part of clean energy. And tidal, we use the current of water to produce power. If the current of water is used to produce power, then it can save our planet. No lethal elements can be released out of the source of clean energy. So clean energy is very much clean. So we get the idea of clean energy, and these are the sources of clean energy. Why should we have focus on clean energy? Because it is environment friendly. It doesn't pollute the environment. For that reason, it is environment friendly. We cannot survive without power. We can maintain our life without having electricity, so we need power. So out of clean energy, we can get power. At the same time, we will have to depend on clean energy as it is environment friendly. And at the same time, it has been mentioned that it doesn't pollute the environment. As it doesn't pollute the environment, at the same time, we derive energy out of these sources. So these sources should be nurtured, formulated, and applied for. And it is expected to last long. On the other hand, fossil fuels are not expected to last long, but it is expected to last long. At the same time, it is renewable, so there is no chance of being exhausted. And clean energy is hard to obtain. The passage says that it is very much difficult to obtain clean energy. What are the problems? Mentions in the passage that we tend to cling to traditional lifestyle. We are supposed to be associated with traditional lifestyles, and we hardly tend to embrace newness, to be out of the established traditional lifestyle. So this is a very difficult venture if you would like to make a wonderful switch in our life from fossil fuels to clean energy, because we try to belong to our established traditional ventures. For that reason, the switch from fossil fuels to clean energy is difficult, a bit of difficult venture. So we have spent the past 150 years, we are used to this clean energy for 150 years, and we are very much dependent on clean energy for a longer period of time. So it is very difficult for us to get out of fossil fuels into clean energy. So it is a difficult venture mentioned in the passage. And technology for producing clean energy exists. Though technology of producing clean energy exists, but it is suppressed by big oil companies. Technology is available. We can easily produce clean energy, but this venture is oppressed by oil companies. If people get dependent on clean energy, then what will happen for oil companies? So each and every moment, the procedure of providing energy out of clean energy is deterred by oil companies. So these are the obstacles mentioned in the passage. We can easily get clean energy, but there lies problem. What are the problems have been mentioned. Hope you have understood the problems. Then cure for cancer. A bit of information you will get here regarding cancer. Cancer, we know, the deadliest disease. It is one of the deadliest diseases as well. Cancer is compared to common cold because like common cold, there are many different types of cancer. Cancer has been compared with common cold because like common cold, it has many variations. So for having many and different types of variations, it has been compared to a common cold. As common cold has different types, similarly cancer also has different types, and at the same time no cure is found. Since the inception of our existence, common cold has been our a close companion. Similarly, and no cure is found yet, we are still suffering from common cold. At the same time, cancer has been compared to common cold because it has no cure as well like common cold. So this is the information mentioned in your passage. And what can be the proposed solution for cancer? What can be the ultimate means through which cancer can be treated? Though it is not curable, we try to treat this disease. So what are the ultimate procedure of the cure of cancer? Progression of modern science is getting advanced, getting progress. So with the progression of modern science and the cure of cancer is trying to be discovered, and wide assortment of drugs, so heavy drugs are assaulted on the patients affected with cancer. So wide assortment of drugs can be the solution of combating cancer, not curing cancer. And the use of genetically modified virus. Yes, genetically modified virus have been brought under research, and out of this research, scientists are trying to get the permanent cure of cancer, and it is under process. At the same time, analysis of chemicals are getting analyzed to find out the ways of treating cancer in a very permanent way. At the same time, development of stem cell treatment, and it is the process through which cancer is treated, not cured, and stem cell treatments is getting developed day by day to have a wonderful boost regarding the cure of cancer. And the use of arsenic, at the same time, it is mentioned that the arsenic is used to withstand cancer, so arsenic can also be used. So these are the tentative way outs to combat cancer, and scientists are desperately trying to find out the actual means through which cancer can be cured. But the problem is that it has various types. So it is very much difficult for the scientists to cope with the situation derived out of the variation of cancer. So it is a big difficult for the scientists. But we hope that with wonderful and extensive research, the day will come when cancer will totally be cured. We hope so. So these are the tentative question set for you, focusing on the lesson discussed today. And number one, why are DNA computers much more powerful than today's standard computers? Why it is much more powerful than today's computer has also been mentioned in our discussion. Efficiency of DNA computer can be focused in order to answer this question. And what different methods of producing clean energy are being used now? What are the methods that are used to derive clean energy? So the methods or the source have been mentioned in a very organized way in one of the slides. So how is cancer similar to common colds? A bit earlier we have discussed why it is similar to common cold and why Buzz Aldrin has criticized the building of moon base. Why he has come up with criticism regarding the establishment of human habitation on the moon has also been discussed. So these are the tentative questions set for you. If you are able to answer to all these questions, it is clear that you have wonderful idea on this lesson. At the same time, you will have to form language without having any grammatical mistakes. You have idea, but you are unable to produce the idea because of the lack of language. So you are to develop your language each and every moment. And here you find this sort of flowchart. Yeah, another flowchart has been given focusing on the specs of DNA. So these are the specs of DNA. Specs of DNA has been mentioned in one of the slides, and following the strategy applied for flowchart, you can use rest of the information in rest of the 5 boxes in within our class environment. We make the strategy of writing flowchart clear, so the class is required, and it is very good news that our class will resume one or two a couple of weeks later, soon will be resumed after 21st February. Probably we think so. So these are the flowchart, different sorts of types of flowchart you will face in your exam. So these are the flowcharts mentioned in the text, and hope you have enjoyed the class and will be enjoying. That's all for today. Thank you very much for being with us. Thanks again.